Q91. A data analyst has written a SQL query that retrieves data from a Delta table for a marketing insights dashboard. To validate the cleanliness of the returned data, they've asked the data engineering team to implement a series of data quality tests. Since the engineering team prefers working in Python with PySpark, they need a way to execute the SQL query and manipulate the results within their Python-based testing framework. Which operation can the data engineering team use to run the query and work with the results in PySpark? A. Select asterisk from sales. B. Spark.delta.table. C. Spark.SQL. D. Spark.table. The correct answer is C. Spark.SQL. Explanation. Spark.SQL select allows you to pass any arbitrary SQL query string directly into PySpark. It executes the query and returns the results as a PySpark data frame, which the engineering team can then manipulate using standard PySpark transformations and testing frameworks. Why other options are incorrect? A. Select asterisk from sales. This is standard SQL syntax, not a Python/PySpark method. B. Spark.delta.table. This is not valid PySpark syntax. Interacting with Delta tables in PySpark requires either spark.read.format, delta.load, or the Delta Lake Python API, deltatable.forName, Spark, D, spark.table, spark.table, table_name, can load an entire table or view into a data frame, but cannot directly execute a custom multi-line or complex SQL query written by the data analyst. Q92. A data engineer is responsible for maintaining a set of workflows that run on a scheduled basis to process daily sales and inventory data. To ensure the workflows are triggered as expected, the engineer wants to choose a method that supports scheduled execution while also being mindful of resource usage and cost. Which method should the data engineer apply to ensure the workflows are being triggered on schedule? A. Use an always running cluster to minimize delay in execution. B. Trigger execution based on real-time data arrival. C. Use a cluster that starts and stops based on the scheduled task duration. D. Keep the workflow active indefinitely unless manually terminated. The correct answer is C. Use a cluster that starts and stops based on the scheduled task duration. Explanation. When configuring Databricks workflows for batch scheduled jobs, using a job cluster, a cluster that provisions automatically when the job triggers and terminates as soon as the task completes, is the standard best practice. It guarantees that the job executes on schedule while optimizing cloud resource usage and minimizing costs, as you only pay compute charges for the exact duration of the workload. Why other options are incorrect? A. Use an always running cluster to minimize delay in execution. Why it's incorrect. Keeping an all-purpose or always-running cluster active 24/7 incurs continuous, unnecessary compute charges during idle periods between runs, violating the requirement to minimize cost at B. Trigger execution based on real-time data arrival. Why it's incorrect. File arrival or event-driven triggers are designed for continuous or micro-batch streaming pipelines. The question specifically asks for a method to support scheduled execution, time-based triggering. D. Keep the workflow active indefinitely unless manually terminated. Why it's incorrect. Scheduled batch workflows should complete their run and release resources automatically. Keeping a job or workflow active indefinitely wastes compute power and requires manual monitoring. Q93. A newly onboarded data engineering team has been tasked with managing the sales table as part of an enterprise ELT pipeline. To ensure they can perform all required operations ranging from data ingestion to transformation, they must be given full privileges on the sales table. Which SQL command enables this level of access? A. Grant all privileges on table sales to team. B. Grant select create modify on table sales to team. C. Grant select on table sales to team. D. Grant all privileges on table team TO sales. The correct answer is A. Grant all privileges on table sales to team. Explanation. In Databricks Unity Catalog/ANSI SQL Grant Management, granting all privileges gives a principal, group, or user full permissions on a specific secureable object, allowing them to perform any operation, including select, modify, delete, alter, etc. The syntax requires specifying permissions, the object type and name on table sales, and the target recipient TO team. Why other options are incorrect? B. Grant select create modify on table sales to team. Why it's incorrect? Modify is not a valid table privilege name in standard Databricks SQL or ANSI SQL privileges. Operations modifying table rows fall under privileges like modify on Delta Lake or update/delete/insert. Furthermore, create is a privilege applied to schemas/catalogs to create objects inside them, not on individual existing tables at sea. Grant select on table sales to team. Why it's incorrect? Select grants read-only access. It does not provide write or transformation privileges, such as updating, deleting, or inserting data.d. Grant all privileges on table team TO sales. Why it's incorrect? The syntax reverses the object and grantee. This attempts to grant permissions on a non-existent table named team to a user/group named sales. Q94. A data engineer has deployed a Delta Live table pipeline in production mode using continuous pipeline mode. The pipeline includes 2 datasets defined with streaming live table and 3 datasets defined with live table referencing Delta Lake sources. The engineer is about to click Start to trigger the pipeline update and knows that unprocessed data is present. All dataset definitions are valid. What is the expected outcome after starting the pipeline? A. All datasets will refresh periodically until the pipeline is stopped and the compute. Resources will remain active for further testing. B. All datasets will refresh once and the pipeline will stop with compute resources, remaining active for further testing. C. All datasets will be refreshed at regular intervals until the pipeline is stopped, and the compute resources will be released when the pipeline stops. D. All datasets will refresh once, and the pipeline will stop, and compute resources will be released. The correct answer is C. All datasets will be refreshed at regular intervals until the pipeline is stopped, and the compute resources will be released when the pipeline stops. Detailed breakdown. Continuous pipeline mode versus triggered pipeline mode. Continuous mode. The engine runs in an ongoing loop, updating both streaming live table and standard live table datasets at regular interval batches as new data arrives until manually stopped. Triggered mode. The engine processes unprocessed data in a single run across all tables and immediately halts execution. Production mode versus development mode. Production mode. Compute resources clusters are managed tightly for production workload costs. Once the pipeline stops or is manually shut down, the compute resources are immediately released/terminated. Development mode. Compute resources stay active, persist, even after pipeline completion or stopping to eliminate cluster cold start times during iterative development and testing. Why the other options are incorrect? A is incorrect because keeping compute resources active after a pipeline run is a feature development mode, not production mode. In production mode, compute resources are terminated when the pipeline stops. B is incorrect because refreshing datasets only once describes triggered mode, and keeping resources active describes development mode. D is incorrect because refreshing datasets once and terminating compute resources describes a pipeline configured in triggered mode production rather than continuous mode. Q95. A data engineer is setting up a new database environment in Databricks and executes the command create database if not exists customer 360 to initialize a workspace for customer analytics. After running the command, they want to confirm where the customer 360 database has been physically stored in the DBFS file system. Where will the customer 360 database be located? A. DBFS/user/hive/database/customer360. B. DBFS/user/hive/warehouse. C. DBFS/user/hive/customer360. D. DBFS/user/hive/database. The correct answer is B. DBFS/user/hive/customer360. /user/hive/warehouse. Explanation. When you create a database or schema in Databricks, specifically within the legacy Hive Metastore, without specifying an explicit location clause, Databricks creates the database inside the default warehouse directory. Inside this base directory, a folder named after the database with a.db suffix, e.g. DBFS, /user/hive/warehouse/customer360.db/ is created to store managed tables and metadata associated with that database. Since the question asks for the base DBFS file system location corresponding to the default warehouse storage, DBFS, /user/hive/warehouse is the correct directory. Why other options are incorrect? A. DBFS, /user/hive/database/customer360. C. DBFS, /user/hive/customer360. And D. DBFS, /user/hive/database. These are incorrect path structures. Databricks does not use a database or direct root hive subfolder structure for default Metastore object storage. Q96. A data engineer is managing a collaborative analytics project in Databricks. They are deciding whether to use built-in notebooks versioning or adopt Databricks Repos for tracking changes. The project involves multiple contributors, feature development, and version control. The engineer wants to understand the advantage of using Databricks Repos in this context. What is an advantage of using Databricks Repos over Databricks? Notebooks versioning. A. Databricks Repos enables reverting notebooks to earlier save states. B. Databricks Repos operates entirely within the Databricks Data Intelligence Platform. C. Databricks Repos allows users to annotate individual modifications. D. Databricks Repos include support for managing multiple branches in a project. The correct answer is D. Databricks Repos include support for managing multiple branches in a project. Explanation. Databricks Repos, now integrated into Databricks Git folders, provides full Git integration, allowing team members to leverage professional version control workflows directly inside the workspace. Why D is correct. Built-in Databricks notebook revision history only tracks linear revisions on a single, isolated notebook. Databricks Repos connect directly to Git providers GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, and allows developers to create, switch, pull, merge, and commit across multiple branches, which is essential for multi-developer feature development and release management. Why other options are incorrect? A is incorrect. Reverting a notebook to an earlier save state is a native feature supported by both built-in notebook revision history, and Databricks Repos.b is incorrect. Built-in notebook versioning operates entirely within the workspace/platform, whereas Databricks Repos syncs with external Git repositories. C is incorrect. Annotating individual modifications, commit messages or revision notes, is available in basic versioning as well as Git commits. It is not the primary Git architectural advantage that Repos offers for team collaboration. Q97. A data platform lead wants to ensure the owner of a Databricks job receives an email notification whenever the job fails during execution. This is part of a reliability initiative to reduce downtime in the analytics pipeline. What is the most effective way to configure this alert? A. Manually programming an alert system in each cell of the notebook. B. Setting up an alert in the job page. C. Setting up an alert in the notebook. D. MFlow model registry webhooks. The correct answer is B. Setting up an alert in the job page. Explanation. Why B is correct. Databricks Workflows Jobs has built-in notification settings configured directly within the job UI under the task or job settings. You can add email notifications for events such as start, success, or failure, which will automatically alert the job owner or designated email addresses whenever execution fails. Why other options are incorrect? A is incorrect. Hard-coding custom alert logic into every cell in Notebook creates high maintenance overhead, introduces code duplication, and fails if the cluster itself crashes or times out before the Notebook cell finishes running. C is incorrect. Notebooks do not have native job-level run notification alert triggers. Email alerts for automated runs are configured at the job/workflow level.d is incorrect. MLflow model registry webhooks are used to trigger actions based on machine learning. Model lifecycle events, such as model stage transitions, not job execution failures. Q98. A data engineer is testing a Delta Live Tables pipeline that includes 2 datasets defined using Streaming Live Table and 3 datasets defined using Live Table from Delta Lake sources. The pipeline is configured in development mode and set to run in continuous pipeline mode. Assuming there is unprocessed data and all table definitions are valid, what outcome should the engineer expect after clicking Start? A. The pipeline will process all datasets once and then shut down, releasing compute resources. B. The pipeline will refresh all datasets at intervals until stopped with compute resources running throughout. C. The pipeline will process all datasets once and remain idle, with compute resources allocated but inactive. D. The pipeline will refresh all datasets at intervals and keep compute resources active to support ongoing testing. The correct answer is D. The pipeline will refresh all datasets at intervals and keep compute resources active to support ongoing testing. Detailed breakdown. To determine the behavior of a Delta Live Tables DLT pipeline, evaluate both configuration dimensions. Pipeline execution mode. Continuous mode behavior. The pipeline ingests unprocessed data and continuously polls for new incoming data, refreshing datasets at regular intervals on an ongoing loop until manually stopped. Pipeline development mode. Development mode behavior. Unlike production mode, which immediately releases/terminates clusters when execution stops, development mode reuses and keeps cluster compute resources active even between runs or while idle. This prevents cluster cold start delays during iterative testing and updates. Why the other options are incorrect. A is incorrect because processing data once and releasing compute resources describes triggered pipeline mode running in production mode. B is incorrect because while it accurately describes continuous mode, it omits the core functional advantage of development mode, keeping compute resources active specifically to support ongoing interactive testing without cluster termination delays. C is incorrect because processing data once describes triggered pipeline mode, not continuous pipeline mode. Q99. A business intelligence analyst is preparing a report using SQL and needs to reshape a dataset where multiple rows represent repeated measurements for each product. To simplify the report layout, they want to restructure the table so that each product occupies a single row with multiple columns for each measurement type. Which SQL keyword should they use to convert the table from long format to wide format? A. Transform. B. Pivot. C. Sum. D. Convert. The correct answer is B. Pivot. Explanation. Why B is correct. In SQL, including Databricks SQL/Spark SQL, the pivot clause is specifically designed to transpose rows into columns. It aggregates data and rotates a table from a long format, multiple rows per entity with distinct categories, into a wide format, single row per entity with new columns for each category/measurement. Why other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. Transform is used in hive/Spark SQL to invoke external scripts or apply row-by-row mapping transformations, not to pivot row values into columns. The C is incorrect. Sum is an aggregate function that reduces rows into summary scalar values within a group by clause, but it does not reshape the table layout from rows to columns by itself. D is incorrect. Convert is used in certain SQL dialects to change data types, e.g., converting a string to a date or integer, not to transpose data. Layouts. Q100. A data engineer is working on a project using a Databricks repo that was cloned from a shared Git repository. After being notified by a teammate that updates have been pushed to the central Git repository, the engineer now needs to sync their Databricks repo to get the changes from the central Git repository. Which of the following Git operations does the data engineer need to run to accomplish this task? A. Merge. B. Push. C. Pull. D. Commit. The correct answer is C, pull. Explanation: why C is correct. The pull operation fetches changes from the central remote Git repository and integrates/merges them into your local branch. In Databricks Repos, clicking pull syncs your Databricks workspace repository with the latest commits pushed by team members to the remote repository. Why other options are incorrect. A is incorrect. Merge combines two branches locally. To retrieve updates from a remote repository, you must first pull those changes up. B is incorrect. Push uploads your local commits to the remote central repository, the opposite of retrieving updates. D is incorrect. Commit saves your local workspace changes to your local branch history. It does not fetch updates from an external remote repository.
If this video helped you clear up some data engineering concepts today, hit that like button and subscribe to Innova 8 Hub so you never miss our daily breakdowns. It really helps the channel grow. Please do not go anywhere. Jump into the next video, and I'll see you there.